Art is part of the human experience. People have come up with many reasons to create artwork, some simple and others more complex. Art can be purely decorative, or it might be created to generate a certain reaction. Art also allows an artist to leave a permanent mark on time. A painting or sculpture allows the artist to preserve a moment that is long past. When did art begin? Well, that's a very controversial question. Researchers have been working for decades to track down the answer. Some have found triangular drawings on rocks in South Africa that are 75,000 years old. They believe that these triangles are art because they're symbolic of something, though there's no way to know for sure what they represent. Other experts don't think that this finding is that impressive. They argue that the images on the rocks don't depict any meaningful message. They suggest that we look to walls, specifically cave walls, to find the origins of art. Sophisticated paintings from nearly 40,000 years ago have been found in caves in Europe and Asia. A red circle on a wall inside the El Castillo cave in Spain is the oldest known cave art at 40,800 years old. When cave art was first studied in Spain in 1880, researchers felt that it was the accomplishment of the earliest humans who migrated from Africa to Europe. In the 1950s, a 39,900-year-old handprint was discovered on the wall of the Sulawesi cave in Indonesia. When researchers found these cave paintings, they noticed similarities to those found in Europe. These artists were using similar techniques and mediums to create their paintings. The fact that these two different groups created such similar art suggests that creating art to communicate ideas is simply part of human nature. Photographer Stephen Alvarez feels that early cave paintings have the power to connect us to this prehistoric world. Stephen photographed the art in the caves of Chauvet-Pont d'Arc in southern France. The dramatic illustrations showed a level of detail that really drew him in and changed his perspective of early peoples. I had an assumption that people 40,000 years ago were primitive, that they thought very differently than me, says Stephen. And the first time I saw real cave art, I was surprised by how visually complex it is. It made me realize that those people thought exactly like I do.
There is a dramatic difference between the daily life of Parisians and the underground world that exists beneath the city. Below the streets, there are hundreds of miles of tunnels with pipes, sewers, subways, and the catacombs. Inside the catacombs, the remains of some 6 million Parisians can be found, arranged in impressive displays. Neat rows of skulls hide piles of bones that have been there since the 18th century, when King Louis XVI had them buried so that he could close some of the city's cemeteries. Stephen Alvarez had the opportunity to take photographs of the catacombs for National Geographic magazine. He captured the world of the cataphiles, the people who spend their days exploring, creating art, or just hiding underground. For these people, life underground is symbolic of freedom. There's no difference between day and night, and there are no real rules. These dark, damp tunnels are quite a contrast from the decorative buildings and wide streets of the City of Lights just a few meters above them. But for the cataphiles, the experience of the underground is what makes the place beautiful.
Today, we're going to study the work of Brazilian street artist Eduardo Cobra. As an adolescent, Cobra preferred art to schoolwork. Eventually, he began working as a street artist. His first critics were people walking by who would look at him working and tell him to get a job. In the early days, street art wasn't always accepted as art. Eventually, it became more common for building owners to ask artists to paint their buildings. Now, people admire Cobra's enormous murals in cities all over the world, from Dubai to New York. No matter the topic, these murals stand out for their interesting use of geometric shapes and bold colors. You should recognize the subjects of his murals. Many of them are portraits of people like Mahatma Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, and Nelson Mandela. Honoring the memory of historical figures is a common theme of Cobra's work. Cobra uses different techniques to create his murals. He uses paintbrushes and spray paint. He changes his technique based on the size and type of surface he's working on. Now, look at some of his most famous murals. What do you think of Cobra's style? Can you choose a favorite from these murals?
Microscopic marvels. Artist Willard Wiggin knows how to make a big impression in small places. Just because you can't see something, that doesn't mean it's not there. This old saying is certainly meaningful for British sculptor Willard Wiggin. The sculptures he creates are very small, so small that most of them fit on the head of a pin or in the eye of a needle. On average, his works are half the size of the period at the end of this sentence. People from around the world admire Willard's work, through a microscope, of course. Celebrities and royalty alike own his sculptures. He's even been honored by the Queen of England for his contributions to the arts. But at every one of his exhibitions, the question is always the same. How does he do it? The answer is very, very carefully. So carefully, in fact, that he actually slows his breathing down and works in between breaths. He learned the hard way that he must do this after he once inhaled one of his sculptures. Before he begins, Willard collects the materials he needs. Many of his sculptures are made with nylon tags from clothing and fibers found in fabrics and carpets around his house. If fibers are too thick, Willard might instead use pieces of a spider web to add detail. To sculpt, Willard works under a microscope using miniature tools that he creates himself. Amazingly, he rarely uses glue. Instead, he carves spaces into the needle or pin and forms his work so that it fits into those spaces. To paint his sculptures, Willard uses the hair from a dead fly as a paintbrush. Creating these detailed works is a very long and difficult process, one that Willard admits isn't always the most enjoyable. "It's a nightmare when I start, but a dream when I finish," he says. A single sculpture can take up to 3 months to complete. People have asked Willard why he has chosen to do something so difficult and time-consuming. His interest in micro-sculpting began when he was 5. He started creating houses and playgrounds for ants. Willard was not a strong student. He struggled with dyslexia, and his teachers were quick to call him a failure. This made him feel small, so focusing on little things helped him to feel big. The smaller his work got, the bigger he felt. "I want to show the world that the little things can be the biggest things," he says.
Calling all creative types. Do you have a problem you'd like to solve? Well, come up with a solution. All Tech Today is sponsoring a contest to help young inventors take a concept and make it a reality. Winners receive a 4-year scholarship for high-tech education, resources to help build your device, support in getting your device on the market. To enter, draw a design of your concept. Write an essay to explain your idea and how it's useful.
Droidganizer. Like most people my age, I hate cleaning up my room. My mom always tells me that if I don't like to do it, I can save my money to buy a robot that will clean up for me. She's joking, of course, but her joke gave me an idea. What if I really could get a robot to clean up my room? As a member of my school's robotics club, I'm learning that it might actually be possible to make, not buy, this robot. My idea, Droidganizer, would build on technological devices that already exist to help around the house. Currently, there are robotic devices that vacuum and mop the floor using sensors to control their movement. Robots also have the ability to pick things up with robotic limbs. Droidganizer would combine these applications into a single device. What would really set Droidganizer apart from current devices is its monitor. A Droidganizer owner would put the monitor on the ceiling somewhere in the room. The person would clean and tidy the room the first time, and then use the monitor to take a photo of how the room should look. The monitor would store this information. Then it would monitor the room from the ceiling. Whenever the room doesn't match the photo, Droidganizer would automatically fix the problem. It would pick up clothes or books on the floor and put them away. It might also make the bed. Droidganizer could even be programmed to vacuum, dust, or clean the windows. Anyone would be happy to have a Droidganizer to do the dirty work. If only Droidganizer existed now. People could be using their time studying, playing sports, or hanging out with friends, not cleaning.